That secret night still haunts me. The heat of his touch, the burn of forbidden desire, the silence heavy with LGBTQ plus romance and hidden passion we could never name. It was a moment of first love, reckless and unforgettable, one that left me heartbroken yet alive. And the cruelest part? We never spoke about it again. That summer didn't feel like it was going to matter at first. Just another stretch of long, hot days that blurred into one another, a pause between obligations of one year and the expectations of the next. I wasn't looking for change. I wasn't even looking for him. But he was there, waiting in the background of it all, like a secret I didn't know I'd been keeping. The house I was staying in belonged to my uncle, an old ranch tucked far enough out of town that nights felt endless, filled with crickets and wind instead of traffic or voices. I was supposed to be helping out, keeping busy, learning a little responsibility before I drifted back to the city. But the truth was, I spent more time avoiding chores than doing them. That's how I met him. He wasn't a stranger to the ranch. He'd been around for years. My uncle called him reliable, the kind of word older men use when they didn't want to say important. He was a little older than me, strong from long hours of work, quiet in the way people are when they've learned to hold their thoughts close. The first time he caught me slipping away from the stables, pretending I had somewhere else to be, he smirked. Not cruel, not mocking, just like he could see straight through me. "You're not much of a ranch hand," he said, leaning against the fence. "And you're not much of a teacher." I shot back before I could stop myself. For a second, I thought he'd be offended. But he only laughed, a low, warm sound that made something shift inside me. That became our rhythm. Small exchanges, quick smiles, quiet moments stretched too long to be casual. I told myself it was nothing, just the kind of camaraderie people fall into when they're forced to share space. But even then, I knew it wasn't that simple. It was in a way he handed me tools without asking, like he'd already memorized how clumsy I was. It was in the way his eyes lingered a beat too long when he thought I wasn't looking. It was in the way my chest tightened every time he laughed at something I said, even when it wasn't funny. We started spending more time together than we needed to, working in the stables, fixing fences, walking the long stretch of road into town. Sometimes we didn't talk at all, and it didn't matter. The silence between us wasn't heavy then. It was easy, comfortable, like music you didn't have to hear to feel. But there were moments that slipped through, like when his shoulder brushed mine, and neither of us pulled away, like when his hand covered mine on the reins, showing me how to hold steady, and the touch lingered long enough to burn, like when I caught him looking at me across the dinner table, his expression so unguarded, so raw, that I had to look away before anyone else noticed. I told myself it was just me, that I was imagining it, that he was kind, steady, patient, and I was reading too much into the spaces between us. But deep down, in the place I didn't let myself admit to often, I knew something was there, something quiet, something dangerous. The days passed, each one folding into the next until time felt suspended. We moved through them like actors in a play we hadn't agreed to but couldn't walk away from. I started to crave his presence in ways I didn't have words for. The sound of his voice, the brush of his hand, the weight of his eyes when they found mine in a crowd. Every night, lying awake in the small room my uncle had given me, I replayed the day in fragments. His laugh, his smile, the way he said my name. And every time, my chest ached with a longing I couldn't name, a longing I didn't dare speak aloud. Because even though the silence between us was filled with meaning, it was also filled with danger. We didn't talk about it. We didn't have to. The world around us didn't allow for that kind of honesty. Out here, under the endless summer sky, some truths were safer left unspoken, but the silence couldn't hold forever. One night, as the heat pressed heavy against the walls and cicadas sang outside, I found myself standing at the edge of the porch with him beside me. The stars stretched wide above us, impossibly bright, impossibly close. Neither of us spoke. Our shoulders almost touched, the gap between us so small it hurt to leave it empty. I wanted to move closer. I wanted to bridge that space, to close the distance that had been burning through me all summer. But I didn't. Neither did he. Instead, we just stood there, breathing the same night air, bound together by everything we weren't saying. And as the minutes stretched into hours, I knew with a certainty that made my heart pound. Something was going to happen. I didn't know when. I didn't know how. But I felt it deep and unshakable. This summer wasn't going to fade into memory like the others. Something was about to change. The next weeks blurred together in a rhythm I hadn't expected to crave. Morning chores, endless heat, the smell of horses and hay clinging to everything I wore. At first, I complained to myself about the monotony, but slowly it became something else. A routine, a comfort, because he was always there. Sometimes he'd beat me to the stables, already leaning against a wooden post with that half smile of his, like he'd been waiting just to see if I'd show up. Other times, I'd catch him watching me struggle with something simple, a latch that wouldn't close, a stubborn rope. Until I gave in and asked for help, he'd step in, quiet and sure, his hands brushing mine in ways that felt like more than accident. I lived for those brushes of contact. A hand steadying my wrist as I fumbled with tack. A shoulder bump when we walked down the dirt road together. His palm flat against the small of my back, when he pushed me out of the way of a restless horse. Each moment small, ordinary to anyone else. But to me, they sparked like wildfire under my skin. And yet, we never spoke about it. That was the strangest part. It wasn't denial, not really. It was something quieter, an understanding we carried without saying. The kind of thing you didn't give words to because the moment you did, it became real. And being real meant being dangerous. One evening, after the heat finally broke and the air turned soft and golden, we rode out together. The horses were restless, hooves thudding against the dry ground as we guided them into the fields. I wasn't good at riding yet, but he stayed close, his voice calm, instructing, teasing just enough to make me laugh when frustration threatened. At one point, my horse balked, jerking sideways. Panic seized me, and I tightened my grip until my knuckles went white. He was there instantly, his hand firm on the reins, his voice steady in my ear. "Breathe," he murmured. "Just breathe." And I did, because he told me to. When it was over, when the horse settled beneath me, I realized how close he was. His chest nearly pressing my back, his breath brushing my temple. For a heartbeat too long, neither of us moved. Then he eased away, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just set fire to the air between us. I carried that moment with me back to the ranch, back to my narrow bed, where sleep refused to come. I replayed it again and again, the steadiness of his voice, the warmth of his body, the way I'd wanted to lean back, to stay there forever. It scared me, because it wasn't just admiration anymore. It wasn't just curiosity. It was want, sharp and insistent. And once I admitted that to myself, I couldn't bear it again. The days after that felt heavier. Every glance seemed to last too long. Every silence seemed to hum with words unsaid. We walked close enough that our arms brushed, and neither of us pulled away. When we worked side by side, I could feel the heat radiating off him, and it was torture not to reach out, not to close the inches between us. Sometimes I caught him looking. Quick glances that darted away the moment I noticed. But they were enough. Enough to tell me he wasn't untouched by this. Enough to make me believe I wasn't alone in what I was feeling. One night, after dinner, we lingered in the kitchen longer than necessary. My uncle had already gone to bed, the house falling into quiet. We stood at the sink, washing dishes in silence, the only sound the soft clink of plates. At one point, our hands collided in the soapy water, just skin against skin, brief and unremarkable. But my breath caught, his hand still for a second before pulling away, a flush rising at the base of his neck. Neither of us said a word. It should have been nothing. But as I dried my hands, I could feel the weight of it lingering between us, stretching thin and taut like a thread ready to snap. Later, lying awake in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and whispered the truth into the emptiness. I want him. And even though no one heard, I felt lighter for admitting it, like naming it, even in secret, made it real in a way that couldn't be undone. The next morning, when I saw him waiting by the fence, his hat tilted low and his smile faint but warm, I realized something had shifted. Not in him, in me. I couldn't keep pretending it was nothing. But knowing that didn't make it easier, because the world wasn't built to forgive boys like us for wanting what we wanted. Out here, in a place where silence carried further than words, secrets weren't just secrets. They were survival. Still, I couldn't stop myself from leaning closer when he spoke. Couldn't stop my eyes from finding his across the table. Couldn't stop my pulse from racing every time he brushed against me, even by accident. We were caught in it, both of us, even if neither dared to say it. And the longer the summer stretched, the clearer it became. This was leading somewhere, whether we wanted it to or not. By the time July burned into its hottest days, I had stopped pretending I didn't notice him. It wasn't a choice, it was impossible. The air itself seemed charged whenever he was near, like the summer heat had seeped into my blood, setting me on edge. I told myself I'd gotten used to it. But the truth was I was only falling deeper into something I didn't know how to stop. Our days followed the same rhythm. We worked side by side, sweat soaking into our shirts, the smell of dirt and leather clinging to us. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes we didn't, but the silence between us had grown thicker, louder. It wasn't the comfortable kind anymore. It pulsed, alive with everything unsaid. At night, after dinner, we'd sit on the porch. He'd lean back in his chair, boots propped up on the railing, hat tipped low. I'd sit close enough to hear the steady rhythm of his breathing. We never planned these moments. They just happened, and yet I couldn't imagine ending the day any other way. I started memorizing things about him. The way his voice dropped softer when he was tired, the way his eyes shifted when he was thinking hard, the scar on his left hand, a thin white line he never talked about. I held on to those details like they were secrets, treasures only I had noticed. But sometimes I wonder if he was memorizing me too. One evening, thunder rolled in from the horizon, a storm that split the sky open. We ran from the fields, laughing breathlessly as the rain poured down. By the time we reached the porch, we were soaked through, hair plastered to our faces, clothes clinging to our skin. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't look away. Lightning flashed, and in that flicker of white light, I swore there was something in his eyes, something hungry, something that matched the ache twisting inside me. Neither of us spoke. The storm raged around us, rain hammering against the roof, thunder shaking the ground. But the only sound I could hear was my heartbeat, wild and unsteady. I thought he might move closer. I thought I might, but the moment passed. He pulled his hat lower, shaking the water from it with a grin, and the spell shattered. Still, I carried that look with me long after the storm passed. After that night, the smallest things felt dangerous, like the way his hand brushed mine when we passed tools back and forth, or how his laughter lingered in my chest longer than it should have, or the rare times he said my name, slow, deliberate, like it meant more than just syllables. I couldn't tell if I was imagining it, or if he was as caught as I was. But the tension wound tighter with every passing day, a rope stretched to its breaking point. One afternoon, while fixing a section of fence, I slipped and cut my palm on a nail. Blood welled fast, bright against my skin. Before I could even react, he was there, gripping my wrist. "Hold still," he said, his voice sharper than usual. He tore a strip from his own shirt and wrapped it around my hand. His fingers were steady, sure, but his jaw was tight. I wanted to tell him it didn't hurt, that it was nothing, but the words stuck in my throat, because all I could feel was his hand holding mine. When he finally let go, I felt the loss like a wound deeper than the cut. That night, I dreamed of him. Not the half-formed flashes I'd been haunted with before, but vivid, his hands, his mouth, the weight of him pressed against me. I woke breathless, trembling, ashamed and yet unable to wish it away. The next day, I couldn't look at him without remembering. Every glance became heavier, every silence sharper. I wondered if he knew, if he could see it written across my face. It was unbearable, but it was also addictive. One evening, as the sun sank low and the sky bled into shades of orange and pink, we ended up sitting on the porch again. My uncle had gone into town, leaving us alone. The air was thick, heavy, buzzing with cicadas. We didn't speak for a long time, just sat there, listening to the night settle in. Finally, he broke the silence. You ever feel like you're holding something back? His voice was low, almost uncertain. I turned toward him, heart pounding. All the time, our eyes met, and the world seemed to narrow down at just that moment. Just him, just me. But before either of us could say more, a car pulled into the driveway. My uncle, back earlier than expected. The spell broke. We both stood quickly, too quickly, like nothing had been on the edge of happening. Like we hadn't just come closer to the truth than we ever had before. That night, lying awake, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a crush. It wasn't just a summer. It wasn't something I could laugh off or forget when the days grew cooler. It was real, and the silence between us couldn't hold it much longer. Something was going to happen. Something that would change everything. The days after that question, you ever feel like you're holding something back? Refused to leave me alone. I kept turning it over in my mind, trying to decide if it had meant what I thought it did, if it was his way of saying the thing neither of us dared to put into words, or if it was nothing, just a passing thought, heavy only because I wanted it to be. Either way, everything between us felt sharper now. Every glance, every brush of his hand, every silence stretched taut. It was as if we crossed a line without realizing it, a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I started noticing how often our eyes lingered on each other, how often a smile flickered, small and private, like he was holding something back too. It was maddening, the not knowing, the not asking, the endless circling around the truth. One afternoon, we were repairing a section of fence under the punishing sun. Sweat clung to us, our shirts sticking to our skin. I fumbled with a hammer, nails slipping through my slick fingers. He laughed softly, stepping close, taking the hammer from me. "Here," he said, his voice low, patient. "Like this." He positioned my hand on the wood, then covered it with his own. His grip was firm, guiding. My breath caught. For a moment, the world shrank to just that touch, the roughness of his palm against mine, the steady warmth of his body, so close I could feel it radiating. When he finally let go, I had to step back, afraid of what might spill out if I didn't. That night, lying awake, I couldn't escape the memory of it, the way it had felt like more than instruction, the way I'd wanted it to last longer, even though it shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. The next day, I caught him looking at me across the table during breakfast. My uncle was talking about weather or feed or something else that didn't matter, but I couldn't focus. His eyes held mine, steady and unreadable, and the silence between us hummed with everything unsaid. I dropped my gaze first, my pulse racing. Was I imagining it? Or was he trapped in this the same way I was? The uncertainty gnawed at me. Later that week, we rode out to check on the cattle. The field stretched wide and golden, the sun sinking low behind us. When the herd was settled, we sat side by side on the fence, boots dangling, watching the horizon blur into pink and orange. "You're quiet tonight," he said after a while. I shrugged, trying to play it off. Just tired. But he looked at me for a long time, like he didn't believe me, like he saw straight through me. I wanted to tell him the truth, that my silence was full of him, that every thought I had circled back to this thing between us, that I didn't know how much longer I could keep holding it in. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I said nothing. He didn't push, but his knee brushed against mine, and he didn't move it. Neither did I. We sat like that until the sun disappeared, the world falling into shadow around us, the space between us charged and unbearable. On the ride back, my uncle pulled up in his truck, slowing beside us on the dirt road. He leaned out the window, calling something about needing us early tomorrow. The headlights lit us both, caught us in their glare. For a split second, I panicked, afraid he'd see something in the closeness, in the way our eyes darted at each other before pulling apart. But my uncle only waved and drove on. Still, my heart raced long after the dust of his truck had settled, because the fear wasn't just about being seen. It was about being known, about someone else catching the truth I couldn't even say aloud to myself. The danger of it clung to me, sharp and electric. That night, I lay awake replaying the moment on the fence, the touch of his knee against mine. How small it had been, how enormous it had felt, It was more than just attraction now. It was a gravity pulling us closer, no matter how hard I tried to resist. And I was starting to think he felt it too. The next morning, I found him already in the stables, leaning against the stall door. His hat shaded his eyes, but when he looked up, his smile was faint, almost hesitant. "You're late," he said. I laughed, but it came out shaky. Guess I overslept. He watched me for a moment, then pushed off the door and stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. Something unspoken passed between us then, heavy and undeniable. Neither of us said a word, but the silence screamed louder than anything we could have spoken. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't in my head. Whatever this was, it was real, and it was only a matter of time before it broke open. The summer days began to blur, but the tension between us only sharpened. By then, I couldn't deny it anymore, not even to myself. Whatever was happening, whatever it was becoming, it wasn't one-sided. I saw in his eyes, in the way his silences stretched, in the way he lingered too close. The door clicked shut, but the danger of it lingered. We sat frozen, breathing hard, the moment shattered but not undone. Finally, he whispered, "We can't." But I cut him off. We already did. Silence. Heavy, suffocating. Then, before I could lose my nerve, I leaned in. The kiss wasn't graceful. It wasn't planned. It was raw, reckless, trembling. My lips brushed his. Soft at first, then harder as he didn't pull away. For a heartbeat, the world disappeared. No fear, no danger, just him. Then he pulled back, breath ragged. "Do you realize what we just—" "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. "And I don't regret it." He stared at me, torn between fear and something deeper, something that matched the ache in my chest. The night pressed close around us, the secret of what we'd just done hanging heavy in the air. We didn't speak again. We didn't need to. But as I lay awake later, my lips still tingling, my heart still pounding, I knew the truth. We had crossed a line, and nothing would ever be the same again. The kiss should have ended there. A fleeting mistake, something we could bury beneath silence. But it didn't. The memory of it clung to me, burned into my skin. Every time he walked past, every time our eyes almost met, it replayed in my head. The warmth of his lips, the way his breath had caught. I knew he felt it too, though he tried to act like nothing had happened. Days blurred. Work became unbearable. Chores were just excuses to sneak glances, to stand too close. The weight of what we'd done pressed against us, thick as the summer heat. And then came that night. The air was restless, charged with the coming storm. Clouds gathered heavy and low, blotting out the stars. The animals grew uneasy, shifting in the stalls, sensing what was about to break. So did I. I was in the barn, restless hands moving straw from one side to the other, when he walked in, hat tilted low, shirt clinging from sweat, eyes shadowed with something I couldn't name. "You're still up?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried in the charged air. "So are you?" I shot back. He gave a short laugh, humorless. Guess neither of us is good at pretending. Our eyes locked. Neither of us looked away. The storm cracked outside, a flash of lightning spilling light across his face. He looked raw, vulnerable, stripped of the careful walls he always carried. I swallowed hard. "We can't keep doing this." "No," he said softly. He stepped closer. "But I don't want to stop." The truth in his voice gutted me. My chest ached, torn between terror and relief. "We'll get caught," I whispered. "Maybe," he said, "but right now I don't care." And then he was in front of me, close enough I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. His hand came up, hesitated, then brushed my jaw. The touch was careful, almost reverent, but it unraveled me completely. I leaned into it. Our lips met again, slower this time, deliberate. No accident, no hesitation. The kiss deepened, hungry and desperate, pulling years of silence into one stolen moment. My hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, terrified he'd slip away. He pressed me back against a wooden stall, the smell of hay and horses wrapping around us, grounding us in reality of where we were and the danger of it. Every second felt like a choice, like a line drawn and crossed again and again. Shame and thrill tangled inside me until I couldn't tell the difference. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads pressed together, our breathing ragged. "This is wrong," he muttered. "I know," I said, "but it feels like the only thing that's right." Lightning split the sky again, thunder rolling so loud it shook the barn. The world outside raged, but in here it was just us, raw, trembling, alive. We didn't speak after that. Words felt too small. Instead, we held on to each other like the storm itself would rip us apart if we let go. And maybe it already had. Because deep down I knew, after night, nothing would ever be the same. The storm passed sometime before dawn, but inside me it hadn't. I lay awake on my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, the taste of his kiss still on my lips, the echo of his breath still hot against my skin. My body was exhausted, but my mind refused to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him leaning into me, felt the press of his hands, heard the low growl in his throat when he whispered, "I don't want to stop." I wanted it again. God, I wanted it more than I'd ever wanted anything. But the fear gnawed at me too. The walls here were thin, not the wooden ones, but the unspoken ones. The watchful eyes, the expectations. If anyone had walked in, if anyone had seen, I turned on my side and pressed a fist against my mouth to stop the sound building in my chest. A sob or a laugh, I wasn't sure. Maybe both. When I finally drifted off, the morning sun was already climbing the horizon. He was at the table when I came downstairs, coffee in hand, face unreadable. My uncle sat across from him, grumbling about the storm damage to the fence line. "Morning," I muttered, avoiding his eyes. "Morning," he said back, casual, careful. Too careful. I sat, poured myself coffee, and stared into the dark surface like it might give me answers. My uncle kept talking, but the words blurred into background noise. My pulse roared too loud, matching the silence between us. At one point, his knee brushed mine under the table. A spark shot up my leg, my whole body tensed. Neither of us moved away, but we didn't look at each other. Not once. The day stretched long and brittle, fixing fence posts, hauling supplies, pretending everything was normal. He kept his distance, speaking to me only when necessary, voice flat, expression shuddered. It hurt worse than rejection, worse than anger. It was like last night had been swallowed whole, erased, except for the way his gaze lingered when he thought no one was looking, except for the way my skin still burned where his hands had been. Every glance was a reminder. It happened, and we couldn't take it back. That evening, when the house quieted and my uncle had gone to bed, I found him outside again, sitting on the same porch steps where everything had started. "You're avoiding me," I said. He didn't look at me. "I'm trying to protect us." "From what?" My voice cracked. "From feeling something real?" His jaw tightened. "From ruining everything." I sank down beside him, my chest aching. It's already ruined, or it's already begun. I don't know which. For a long time, we just sat there, the night air cool against our skin, the cicadas buzzing in the trees. Finally, he said, "I've never wanted anyone the way I want you, and that terrifies me." The words hit me like a blow and like salvation. I turned toward him, my hand brushing his. Then, "Don't be afraid." His eyes finally met mine, dark and desperate. "You don't understand. If they knew, if anyone knew," he trailed off, shaking his head. "I know," I whispered, "but last night can't happen again." The words carved into me. My throat burned, my chest tightened, but I forced myself to nod. "Okay." But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie, because the truth was written all over his face, reflected in the tremor of his voice, the way his hand twitched like it wanted to reach for me but didn't. The truth was simple. We'd already crossed the line, and whether we spoke of it or not, whether we touched again or not, that secret night would bind us forever. Later, lying in the dark, I thought about his words. It can't happen again. Maybe he was right. Maybe we'd never touch again, never let it out in the open. Maybe we'd bury it beneath silence, let it fester into something unspoken but unbreakable. But even then, even in the raw ache of his rejection, I knew this. Some things don't end just because you say they should. And what happened between us, what we let happen, was one of those things. Some things can't be undone. That night became our ghost, following us through every day that came after. We never spoke of it again, not in words. But it lived in the silences, in the way our eyes lingered too long, in the way his hand would sometimes brush mine and then retreat as it burned. Life pressed forward. Chores, seasons, the rhythm of routine. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside, everything had. Sometimes I wonder if I had imagined it, if the storm had tricked me into believing something impossible. But then I'd catch the way his gaze softened when he thought I wasn't looking, and I'd know it was real, too real, and yet it remained locked between us, buried under fear, under shame, under the unspoken understanding that the world was not ready for what we had touched. Did I regret it? No, because for one night, I was alive in a way I had never been before. For one night, I wasn't pretending. For one night, I belonged. We never spoke about it again, but I carry it still, not as a wound, but as a reminder that love, even when hidden, even when forbidden, is still love. And sometimes that's enough to change a life forever. That was our secret night, the one we never spoke about again, though it changed everything. Now I want to hear from you. If you've ever had a moment you couldn't put into words, a kiss, a look, a secret you still carry, share it in the comment below. And if you can't share the details, tell me in just one word how this story made you feel. Heartbroken, seen, exposed, alive, confused. I'm waiting to read your truth.